If I told you that sitting on your desk right now is not just a machine, but a time machine, would you believe me? That every key you touch is older than electricity, older than wires, older even than steel itself. Because hidden inside that glowing box is an ancient mystery, one that's been waiting for you to unlock it. The mystery isn't the silicon. It's the soul behind the screen, and by soul I mean the constellation of choices, focus, and values that quietly dictate what that machine becomes the moment your fingers touch the keys. A computer is a mirror that moves at the speed of electricity. It reflects the diet of your attention, the discipline of your routines, and the standards you refuse to negotiate. You think you're booting up a device. In reality, you're logging into your character. Every click is a confession of what you want. Every tab is a testimony of what you tolerate. The processor doesn't have opinions, but it does have a perfect memory, and it will faithfully amplify, automate, and accelerate whatever you feed it. Whether that's a blueprint or a bad habit, if your values are scattered, your screen will be loud. If your priorities are clear, your interface will start to feel like an instrument tuned to your purpose. That glow on your face at midnight is not just light. It's a lighthouse or a siren, depending on the captain at the helm. Focus is the new fire. Where you point it, things melt or forge. The same cursor can highlight a paragraph that educates you or a thread that empties you. The same search bar can unlock a language, a trade, a partnership, or spiral into the maze where time goes to die. This is why intention matters more than any feature list. A distracted mind turns a supercomputer into a slot machine. A disciplined mind turns a budget laptop into a printing press. The mystery lives in that split second before you press enter, where desire becomes decision. Choose with purpose, and the machine becomes a multiplier. Drift, and it becomes a magnifier for drift. People say the algorithm is out to get them. The truth is the algorithm is out to get whatever you repeatedly ask for, and it will bring it to your door with a smile and a push notification. Train it with your highest aims, and it becomes a quiet partner in your calling. Train it with impulses, and it becomes an efficient courier for regret. Values are the operating system beneath the operating system. Set them high, and your machine inherits a kind of moral ergonomics. Your bookmarks start looking like a curriculum. Your history reads like progress. Your files arrange themselves around problems you are proud to solve. Set them low, and the same machine becomes a carnival of almosts. Half-read articles, half-finished ideas, half-hearted commitments. Proof that speed without direction only gets you nowhere faster. The ancient mystery is stewardship, not the stewardship of code, though that matters, but the stewardship of self. Tools take the shape of the hands that hold them. A chisel in a sculptor's grip births David. In a careless grip it scars marble. Your computer is the chisel. The statue is your day, your craft. Your relationships, the future you are quietly drafting in the background while the world scrolls by. Choice by choice, you program your tomorrow. You decide if the first keystrokes of your morning open a door or open a distraction. You decide if the rhythm of your week is deep work or shallow refresh. You decide if the soundtrack of your screen time is curiosity or cynicism. And the machine, obedient, tireless, agnostic, says yes. Yes to the study plan, yes to the side hustle, yes to the gossip, yes to the grudge. It doesn't care what you choose, it cares that you choose, and it will optimize for that pattern until it can predict you better than you predict yourself. That is why the most important update isn't the firmware, it's the framework. Your principles patched, your boundaries hardened, your purpose pinned to the top of your life like a sticky note you can't swipe away. When your values lead, your tabs follow in formation. When your values drift, your tabs multiply like weeds. Attention is finite, but its return is exponential when invested with conviction. Put 10 focused minutes into a skill every day and the graph bends. Put 10 scattered hours into novelty and the graph flatlines. The soul behind the screen decides which curve you ride. It decides whether your inbox is a battlefield or a garden, Whether your calendar is a cage or a compass, whether your password vault is guarding tools or hiding toys, you can treat your device like a vending machine for dopamine or like a workshop for destiny. The circuitry is the same either way. The difference is the person in the chair, the breath before the click, the courage to close what flatters you and open what forms you, the quiet authority to say not now to noise and yes, right now to the work that builds a life you recognize. When the screen finally goes dark from the clay tablet to the cloud, the story of computation is a long braid of human habits braided into tools that outlive us. When you slide your palm across a laptop, you're touching a line that begins with someone carving numbers into wet clay and saying, "This must be kept." Long before microprocessors and motherboards, there were merchants who kept ledgers on reed and papyrus, priests who cataloged births and harvests, and scholars who argued over the order of things so the next generation could find what mattered. Those early acts of recording were not incidental, they were an ethic, a refusal to let knowledge drift like smoke. The abacus, humble and wooden, taught the hands of a child to think in patterns. It translated quantity into motion and motion into understanding. Each bead slid was a tiny program, a repeatable algorithm performed by muscle and memory, a ritual that trained the mind to expect structure and return it. Picture that arithmetic as choreography, computation as practiced discipline. When you run a spreadsheet, now you're using a distant cousin of that bead, and rod logic, the formula bar, is a mechanized chant of the same intention, order, repeat, resolve. Libraries played the long game. Their shelves were the original persistent storage repositories that said aloud, some things are worth preserving through generations. Think of a scroll being copied by candlelight, margins full of notes. The marginalia of a mind conversing with the past. That conversation is compiled into the present every time you search for an answer online. Because search engines are libraries reimagined as machines' indexes and references compressed into responses. The architecture changed, but the impulse did not. Human beings have always needed to externalize memory to make complex projects possible. We pass knowledge forward by creating containers for it, whether clay, vellum, or server racks humming in concrete vaults. Those servers are modern temples, cooled and secured, holding up the accumulation of countless small decisions: what to save, what to delete, what to elevate. The preservation impulse is ancient, the scale is new. Even our languages for giving instructions borrow from the old ways. A recipe, a prayer, a set of laws, these are algorithms in narrative form. The first programmers were storytellers who reduced a process to repeatable steps. Plant when the moon is right, measure the grain by the cup, honor the threshold before crossing. Over centuries, those instructions were abstracted into manuals, then into mechanical automata, then into punched cards and flowcharts until finally they were distilled as code. But at heart, code is still an instruction written by a human to a human-made system. When you type a command into a terminal, you're standing in a long line of decision makers telling someone or something how to act. There's also a moral lesson embedded in the history. Tools inherit the ethics of their users. The abacus can teach calculation that feeds a kingdom or balances a ledger, so a farmer knows he's been cheated. Papyrus can preserve poetry that elevates a people or propaganda that enslaves them. Today's devices are morally neutral, but practically biased by intent. The architects who first inscribed law on stone wanted continuity. Those who first labored over ledgers wanted fairness in trade. These aims shape the use of tools. Your personal computer will reflect your aims in the same way. What you choose to store, to automate, to broadcast, will project values outward at the velocity of light. Consider too the matter of scale and accessibility. Where once information was the province of scribes and scholars, the evolution of these technologies flattened access. The abacus could be taught at a market, a scroll copied by hand cost time but could travel. Today, with a device in many hands, the boundaries have collapsed, and with them, the responsibility to steward what we share. That democratization echoes the past, but amplifies the stakes. The wisdom of the ancients was curated. Our modern stream is relentless. Learning the lessons of those who preserved knowledge, selectivity, reverence, patience, can help us navigate abundance without being flattened by it. Finally, there's a continuity of practice. Rituals that prepared human minds for complexity are still useful. The quiet concentration of a scribe copying a text, the repetition of a merchant tallying sums, the discipline of an apprentice learning a craft, these are the same muscles you flex when you build a skill online, when you curate your digital library, when you guard your attention. The ancient practices were not quaint. They were training grounds for capacity. So when you sit down at your computer, remember you are not operating a godless machine, but sitting inside a tradition that taught people how to remember, calculate, and choose. The device is new, but the lessons are old. Honor the record, train the hand, respect the archive, and you will use technology not as a spectacle, but as an extension of a life well ordered. Binary is more than a technical shorthand. It is the oldest grammar of choice written in the language of the universe. Two states, 1 and 0, on and off, are the scaffolding that holds every calculation, every decision, every moment you choose to act or to pause. When you press a key and the screen responds, you are witnessing a lineage that runs from the flick of a torch in a cave to the flip of a transistor in a chip. That lineage is built on contrasts, light and dark, work and rest, promise and betrayal. Binary compresses those contrasts into the smallest possible decision, and in doing so it reveals something ancient and unignorable about how the world organizes meaning. Life is, at its core, a procession of yeses and nos. The moral weight of those tiny switches is immense because they compound. A single yes to distraction is a current that flows into habit. A single no to an urgent whim is a dam that protects future virtue. The machine embodies this arithmetic of consequences with ruthless clarity. There is no nuance in a transistor, only state. Yet that apparent simplicity is deceptive, for from a million simple states rise patterns that can be beautiful or ruinous. Consider light and dark in human history. Dawn meant work, dusk meant shelter. The ancients built rituals to navigate that rhythm. Binary is the same ritual expressed electrically. It forces us to reckon with the fact that many of our most consequential acts are not grand gestures, but repeated small decisions that lean one way or the other until a life is shaped. Algorithms, those modern hairs of human instruction, are constructed from binary choices guided by values. When designers write code, they are choosing which path a program should take under which circumstance. Those choices are moral too. They privilege some outcomes and minimize others. The logic of F then is moral logic. If this data suggests danger, then warn. If this pattern predicts profit, then prioritize. Behind every conditional sits a judgment about what matters. So binary is not cold mathematics. It is distilled ethics. The ancient poets and lawgivers frame their rules in binaries as well. Do this, do not do that. Those formulations trained communities to respond consistently to create predictable societies where trust could flourish. In our era, ones and zeros scale trust or betrayal at the speed of light. A single permission granted in software can open a door for good, access to learning, community, commerce, or for harm, surveillance. Manipulation, erosion of dignity. That is the double edge of binary thinking. It gives us power to encode order, and it gives us the temptation to reduce complex human realities into neat toggles that ignore context and mercy. So the real challenge is not to reject binary thinking. It is inescapable, but to steward it wisely, to build circuits that reflect generosity as well as efficiency, to write conditionals that value human flourishing as much as technical elegance. On the personal level, understanding life as a cascade of binaries helps you see where agency lies. You cannot control every outcome, but you can control the lever you pull. Do you open your emails at dawn or protect your morning? Do you respond to every outrage or conserve your energy for constructive work? Each of these is a binary doorway that, once walked through repeatedly, will define the tenor of your days. The ancients taught that habit becomes character. Binary systems teach the same lesson with silicon precision. There is also a poetic symmetry here, just as light reveals what was hidden. Binary decisions reveal the architecture of your life. The screen does not judge, it only executes. But the pattern of those executions writes your story in a ledger that others read. Colleagues, children, history. When you choose, you are scripting not only a micro-action, but a narrative arc. And because binary systems are predictable, they are also reversible. If you act with courage, flip a state, change a pattern, reroute the flow. Rebooting, patching, updating. These are metaphors as much as operations. They remind us that mistakes can be corrected and that systems, whether electronic or moral, can be improved. But repairs require clarity about the binary choices underneath the surface. Which defaults do you accept? What notifications do you allow? What assumptions do you automate? The ancient mystery is revealed in that interrogation. Beneath the dazzling complexity of modern tech, there is a simple moral landscape of yeses and nos waiting for a steward. Become deliberate about them, and the machine becomes a faithful ally. Neglect them, and the same logic that creates order will scale your negligence into calamity. Binary is more than a technical shorthand. It is the oldest grammar of choice written in the language of the universe. 2 states, 1 and 0, on and off, are the scaffolding that holds every calculation, every decision, every moment you choose to act or to pause. When you press a key and the screen responds, you are witnessing a lineage that runs from the flick of a torch in a cave to the flip of a transistor in a chip. That lineage is built on contrasts, light and dark, work and rest, promise and betrayal. Binary compresses those contrasts into the smallest possible decision, and in doing so it reveals something ancient and unignorable about how the world organizes, meaning life is, at its core, a procession of yeses and nos. The moral weight of those tiny switches is immense because they compound. A single yes to distraction is a current that flows into habit. A single no to an urgent whim is a dam that protects future virtue. The machine embodies this arithmetic of consequences with ruthless clarity. There is no nuance in a transistor, only state. Yet that apparent simplicity is deceptive, for from a million simple states rise patterns that can be beautiful or ruinous. Consider light and dark in human history. Dawn meant work, dusk meant shelter. The ancients built rituals to navigate that rhythm. Binary is the same ritual expressed electrically. It forces us to reckon with the fact that many of our most consequential acts are not grand gestures, but repeated small decisions that lean one way or the other until a life is shaped. Algorithms, those modern hairs of human instruction, are constructed from binary choices guided by values. When designers write code, they are choosing which path a program should take under which circumstance. Those choices are moral too. They privilege some outcomes and minimize others. The logic of if-then is moral logic. If this data suggests danger, then warn. If this pattern predicts profit, then prioritize. Behind every conditional sits a judgment about what matters. So binary is not cold mathematics. It is distilled ethics. The ancient poets and lawgivers frame their rules in binaries as well. Do this, do not do that. Those formulations train communities to respond consistently to create predictable societies where trust could flourish. In our era, ones and zeros scale trust or betrayal at the speed of light. A single permission granted in software can open a door for good, access to learning, community, commerce, or for harm, surveillance, manipulation, erosion of dignity. That is the double edge of binary thinking. It gives us power to encode order, and it gives us the temptation to reduce complex human realities into neat toggles that ignore context and mercy. So the real challenge is not to reject binary thinking. It is inescapable, but to steward it wisely, to build circuits that reflect generosity as well as efficiency, to write conditionals that value human flourishing as much as technical elegance. On the personal level, understanding life as a cascade of binaries helps you see where agency lies. You cannot control every outcome, but you can control the lever you pull. Do you open your emails at dawn or protect your morning? Do you respond to every outrage or conserve your energy for constructive work? Each of these is a binary doorway that, once walked through repeatedly, will define the tenor of your days. The ancients taught that habit becomes character. Binary systems teach the same lesson with silicon precision. There is also a poetic symmetry here. Just as light reveals what was hidden, binary decisions reveal the architecture of your life. The screen does not judge, it only executes. But the pattern of those executions writes your story in a ledger that others read. Colleagues, children, history. When you choose, you are scripting not only a micro action, but a narrative arc. And because binary systems are predictable, they are also reversible. If you act with courage, flip a state, change a pattern, reroute the flow. Rebooting, patching, updating. These are metaphors as much as operations. They remind us that mistakes can be corrected and that systems, whether electronic or moral, can be improved. But repairs require clarity about the binary choices underneath the surface. Which defaults do you accept? What notifications do you allow? What assumptions do you automate? The ancient mystery is revealed in that interrogation. Beneath the dazzling complexity of modern tech, there is a simple moral landscape of yeses and nos waiting for a steward. Become deliberate about them, and the machine becomes a faithful ally. Neglect them, and the same logic that creates order will scale your negligence into calamity. Algorithms did not arrive as sudden marvels of the digital age. They are the descendants of human wisdom codified into steps, lists, and routines designed to guide action. Long before anyone wrote lines of code, people were writing instructions for living, teaching others how to move through the world with clarity and discipline. A recipe scratched into clay, a ritual practiced at dawn, or a rule carved into stone was already an algorithm, an ordered path meant to achieve a predictable outcome. The brilliance of these ancient patterns was not in their complexity, but in their consistency. They took what was overwhelming and broke it down into manageable parts. If you follow this sequence, you will arrive at a result. That principle undergirds not only the way a computer executes commands today, but the way human beings have always pursued mastery. The mystery is not that machines run on algorithms, it is that people always did, and machines simply scaled what we started. Clear priorities are the hidden framework behind every effective algorithm. A list of steps without an ultimate aim is noise. Ancient teachers knew this when they taught principles before procedures. They understood that you can only teach someone how to act if they first know why they act. Code operates on the same principle. Each function is written to serve a larger program. Each subroutine contributes to a greater whole. Without the why, the steps fragment. In life, if your values are disordered, your personal algorithm collapses into contradiction. You may run fast, but toward the wrong horizon. With clarity, however, your routines form a ladder, each rung bearing weight and directing you upward. That is why human wisdom has always preceded human technique. A disciplined routine without moral guardrails produces efficiency without meaning. A machine can compute flawlessly and still serve destruction if the aim was flawed. History is filled with evidence. Systems designed with no moral compass have been used to oppress, exploit, and deceive. Moral guardrails are the essential lines of code that keep power from corrupting its purpose. Every algorithm we rely on today reflects this lineage: sorting, searching, ranking. These are not merely technical operations, but extensions of ancient habits. Merchants once had to decide how to arrange their goods. Scribes had to decide how to order scrolls. Judges had to decide how to weigh testimonies. Each decision required a process, and processes are algorithms in seed form. Computers now accelerate them at inhuman speed, but the skeleton is familiar. What has changed is scale, not essence. A merchant could miscount a dozen beans. A database can misclassify 1,000,000 entries. The danger and the potential both grow in proportion. That is why remembering the human roots of algorithms matters. They were never designed to be neutral abstractions. They are expressions of human intention, encoded and repeated. When you automate, you immortalize the values you held at the moment of construction. On the personal level, routines function as living algorithms. The sequence you run each morning, wake, reflect, work, connect, is a program. Run it often enough and it becomes self-reinforcing. Skip it and you introduce bugs, fatigue, distraction, anxiety. Just as a programmer tests code for errors, you must test your routines for integrity. Are your steps aligned with your deepest aims? Are you building loops that return you to the same unproductive state? The ancient wisdom was to examine habits constantly, to prune what no longer served, to strengthen what bore fruit. That practice is as relevant now as it was when monks kept daily hours of prayer or artisans repeated their training drills. Machines reveal this truth in stark clarity. Code either works or it fails, depending on whether the instructions were coherent and grounded. Human lives operate under the same logic, though the failures may take longer to appear. Discipline is the invisible force that animates algorithms. Without the patience to follow each step, the sequence collapses. The ancient builders of temples and calendars knew that skipping a step meant disaster. They labored methodically, knowing that order was safety. Computers inherit that logic. They will not tolerate a missing semicolon or a broken link. They simply stop, forcing correction before continuing. Life offers more room for error, but not immunity. The discipline to follow through, to repeat the right steps until they become instinct, is what separates vision from accomplishment. In that sense, the algorithm is not just a tool, but a mirror. It shows you what happens when intention meets consistency. It proves that clarity plus repetition equals power. At the deepest level, algorithms remind us that chaos is not inevitable. The universe may appear overwhelming, but order can be distilled one step at a time. That was the ancient mystery our ancestors intuited when they set their lives to rhythms, codified their laws, and built their crafts. The computer merely echoes back that truth in the precise hum of its processors. It is not the algorithm that matters most, but the wisdom behind it. Write your personal code with principle, test it with honesty, and run it with discipline, and the results will scale far beyond the screen in front of you. Attention is the new currency, and your device is the mint that stamps value into whatever you hand it. Every swipe, every click, every idle scroll is a small transaction that either enriches you or bankrupts you over time. When you give your attention to something on the screen, you're making an investment decision, and like any investment, the returns compound. 10 focused minutes a day learning a language eventually yields conversation and opportunity, while 10 unfocused minutes a day chasing novelty compounds into a year of lost afternoons you will never get back. The machine doesn't care which you choose, it simply optimizes for the pattern it finds, amplifying repetition until your behaviors become its default. Designers and engineers didn't invent this by accident. Interfaces are crafted around human attraction, using cues that pull the eye and tug the mind. Variable rewards, bright badges, the little red counts that say, attend to me. Those nudges are effective because attention is scarce, and scarcity makes anything that hooks it valuable. The ancient merchants who built marketplaces understood the same law. Stall placement, eye-catching wares, the cadence of a salesperson's pitch, all were designed to seize attention. Today, those same instincts have been mechanized and scaled so that a single notification can carry the persuasive force of a crowd. If attention is currency, then distraction is depreciation. Every time you fragment your concentration, there's a cognitive tax. Switching costs that chew up short-term memory, reduce depth of thought, and make creative work harder. The brain needs uninterrupted stretches to do its best work. Interrupted stretches become anemic. That's why rituals matter. The ancients used routines, dawn prayers, apprenticeships, dedicated hours of craft to protect sustained attention. You can design similar protections for your day, block a window of undisturbed work, turn off unnecessary alerts. Create a physical boundary between your device and your body when you need rest. Treat attention like money in a safe, hard-to-access, reserved for priority expenditures. When you do, you'll notice that tasks that used to take hours begin to take less because depth produces leverage. One concentrated hour can outperform 3 scattered ones because your mind enters flow and the work compounds on itself rather than fragmenting. There is also an economy of values at stake. What you repeatedly feed your attention becomes the taste your mind develops. Constant exposure to outrage, fear, or comparison teaches your brain to prefer those states. Your effective baseline shifts toward anxiety or scarcity. Conversely, regular exposure to learning, beauty, or service trains different neural pathways, habits of curiosity, gratitude, and resilience. The technology doesn't judge, it mirrors. If your feed is tuned to spectacle, spectacle will be the currency you earn. If you tune it to craft and community, those are the returns you'll see. This makes curation a moral as well as practical act. Choosing what to follow, what to save for later, what to delete. These are ethical decisions disguised as simple digital housekeeping. The ancients curated too. They selected which tales to copy into manuscripts, which laws to inscribe, which teachers to praise. The survival of their values depended on such curation. Your future depends on yours. Habits are the ledger entries of this economy. Small, regular deposits of attention into skill building, relationship care, and reflection yield capital over years. Small, regular withdrawals into gossip, doom scrolling, and reactive outrage drain it. The compounding effect is merciless but fair. It does not care about intent, only pattern. That's liberating because patterns can be changed, but it is also sobering because change requires disciplined repetition. Technology offers tools to enforce habit timers, blocking apps, schedule do not disturb modes. Use them not as crutches but as scaffolding until internal discipline becomes the default. Like training wheels, they are meant to be removed when the muscle is built. There is a social dimension too. Attention directed at others is a form of currency exchanged in relationships. When you give focused time to a child, a partner, a colleague, you're investing in trust and presence. When your gaze is fragmentary and your replies automatic, you're making micro withdrawals that erode that capital. The device can mediate intimacy or erode it. It can be a bridge or a wall. Choosing to put the phone away at dinner, to listen without preparing a reply, to show up fully. Those are high-yield investments in human capital that no algorithm can replicate. Finally, consider intention as your budget. Without a budget, spending runs wild. Decide daily what deserves your attention and what does not. Name the metric you care about: learning hours, meaningful conversations, finished projects. And protect the time that produces those outcomes. Measure not by mere activity, but by progress toward things that matter. The ancient wisdom taught people to live with purpose and to structure days around it. Your device is merely a powerful steward of that structure. If you steward it well, it will amplify your highest aims. If you let it run you, it will compound your scattered impulses into a life you barely recognize. Choose where you invest your attention, for it is the one currency that, once spent, cannot be reclaimed. We started with a glowing box and ended up looking into a mirror. That rectangle on your desk is not magic. It is memory made practical, ritual made fast, and choice made electric. The ancient practices of recording, repeating, and guarding truth have been poured into circuits and code. What's new is speed, not soul. So do the old work with new tools. Decide before you click. Build routines that are worth automating. Protect your attention like treasure. Let binary choices be the architecture of character, and let algorithms serve the aims you would proudly pass on. When you leave this room, treat your device like a faithful instrument, not a master. Curate more than you consume. Learn more than you like. Produce more than you passively observe. Reboot your habits when they fail. Patch your values when they wobble. And never outsource your courage to a screen. The ancient mystery isn't solved by faster chips or fancier apps. It's lived out one deliberate choice at a time. Good luck as you power up with purpose. May your clicks build legacy, not just noise. Thank you for listening and for choosing to steward the most powerful technology. You own your own life.